Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Hitakiri Singh, and we got a really interesting video today, a very smashing video. We're going to talk about the top 5 things that you can do in Monster Hunter Wilds to increase your damage in order of importance, as in how much damage it actually increases for you. And this is a video for all weapon classes. This is not specific for the longsword or anything like that. Basically, there's 5 attributes that increase your damage significantly more than anything else you can do in this game. And of those 5, I kind of made a tier list so you can understand. Towards the bottom tier, these things increase your damage, but less than whenever we get to the top tiers. So, my hope in this video is to create some game knowledge so you guys understand for yourselves when you're making your builds what is going to be the best for your playstyle when it comes to I am wanting to add damage and damage skills to my build, because a lot of these skills are going to be varying based on what weapon you use. Some things are just going to be good for right across the board, but you're going to have to make a balance of these top 5 things to really figure out what's going to suit your playstyle, or if you just want to go to the extreme and maximize damage as much as humanly possible. So sit back and relax. Got a lot of cool stuff to talk about in this video, and then at the end we'll do a little what's coming up and intro or welcome or invitation to our squad. Thanks for joining me again today. If you enjoyed this content, please like, comment, and subscribe. That would be totally awesome. And here we go. Coming in at number 5 are your buffs, and this is primarily your food. For your +5, I generally like to eat the Caprice meal for the random increments of damage increases throughout the fight, and your Mega Demon Drug, your Might Seed, and your Demon Powder. There are other buffs like the Diva or Hunting Horn, but I'm just going to stick to the ones that you can always have on every hunt to increase your total raw by 32 for every hunt. The Mega Demon Drug I just took increased my raw by 7. The Demon Powder by 10, and the Might Seed I'm about to take another 10. That's where you get the 32. You do want to build a swap offset when you go back to camp that includes the skills Item Prolonger and Free Meal, so we can prolong the duration of all our items from 30 minutes to 45 for the Mega Demon Drug, and the pills and the powder to 4.5 minutes rather than 3. And you don't need to keep rebuffing. This is a basic bone set for the entire video. We're going to compare our numbers to this. There's no increase in damage skills here, just the +1 attack, but it's going to go across the board. Don't pay too much attention to the numbers. It's just the increase of the numbers that we're going to actually talk about. So this is our baseline test. So on that set, now we just add all 3 of our buffs. We're not adding the food, just 27 raw, just to see what kind of difference that's going to make in our actual damage numbers. And see, same set. And here we go. It pretty much gives you somewhere between an 8 to 10 damage increase per tick, depending on the type of move you're doing. So very nice, fairly significant, and free. Always do this before a fight. At number 4, we have increasing your raw attack stat. And this is going to be done primarily through your skills like your Counter Strike and Agitator and Peak Performance and things like that. The skills that you have that actually increase your attack number on your weapon. Some people are going to be surprised to see it this low because there's so many times I see people would have like 100% affinity on a longsword or some weapon that can crit hit, and they're running attack boost 5. And it's totally the wrong direction if you want to go for max damage, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Here we have a set. I'm just adding as much attack as I can. No affinity or anything like that. I got attack boost 5, peak performance maxed at 5, burst at 5, a bunch of extra raw than just your buffs. And now what we're seeing here is an increase of about 20 to 27 per damage tick. So it's just like the buffs. You're just able to increase your attack stat more with these skills, giving you these higher numbers. At number 3, we have Sharpness. And it's not very well explained in this game how important this is. Basically, you start off the game with green Sharpness. When you go from green to blue, you are increasing your damage by 20%. When you go from blue to white, you're increasing your damage an additional 12%, so a total of 32%. It's quite massive. And you don't immediately notice this because your numbers don't immediately go up that much, but what you do notice is when you lose sharpness and how steeply they decline. It's incredibly important to make sure you have enough sharpness to be able to not sharpen again until it's a convenient time for you. Generally, when the monster is running away or flying off, or you run Master's Touch to have an 80% reduction in sharpness loss. So if you do 100% crit hits, you just never ever lose sharpness. This is why you want to keep it, because all your other skills that you're buffing to increase your attack, as soon as you lose your sharpness, you just lost 12% of your overall damage on everything. So it defeats the purpose of doing all of that. Here's a normal set, just with an Ardian weapon with white sharpness. So the numbers are similar to our base test, 70s, 80s, a little bit higher when we get into the wounds. But what I want you to notice here is when we drop off into blue sharpness, all of a sudden it goes down to 68.9, 70s. And then when we go down into green sharpness, we just get to numbers that are just too low for me to even mention out loud. It's repulsive. Yeah, so keep your sharpness up to maintain the highest damage you can. All right, everybody, I need to throw you into a little bit of a loop here because we're going to discuss the top two things that increase your damage, but really you should consider them more like 1A and 1B. And in order to fully understand 1B, we need to kind of understand 1A. So we're going to do this a little bit out of order. And the top two things that contribute to the highest damage output is your affinity for 1A, and 1B is your critical boost to increase your critical damage. So the game does a terrible, terrible job at explaining affinity. In fact, I don't think there's anywhere in any of the menus I saw that actually lets you know that affinity increases the chances of you doing a critical hit, and by a definition mechanic of the game, critical hits do 25% more damage on top of whatever the damage of a normal strike would be, and there's way more to that than just that statement. For example, you have a lot of skills that increase your attack, but they're very hard locked in how they actually do that. For example, Lord Soul will give you a 5% increase on your damage on the attack value of your weapon only. So this Ardian weapon with 225 attack gets an 11.25%, or sorry, 11.25 raw increase in its damage, and that's it. It doesn't get increase. That 5% is not going to ever cause any kind of increase or be increased by anything other than just the attack value. So it's a fixed increase. It's a little bit different with affinity. So with affinity, because it's a 25% increase to whatever attack that you're doing, things like the buffs that you just took, things that are increasing your raw, like your counter attack and your counter strike, that all gets correlated as whatever damage you're outputting at that current moment before you do a crit hit. And then when you do the crit hit, it does that and multiplies it and adds 25%. This is exactly why you have builds, that look like this. This is just a longsword version, and I will have a discussion because this is for weapons that can crit hit, but that's the majority of the ensemble here. There are some weapons that don't crit hit, but towards the end of the video, we'll talk about it as, like I mentioned in the beginning, you're going to have to find your balance of these top 5 things to output the most damage you can, or the most damage you actually want to. And at number 1B, we got Critical Boost, and all this does is it increases that 25% at Crit Boost 5 all the way up to 40%. That's a 15% increase in damage. And in Monster Hunter as a franchise, when you have things like Affinity and Crit Boost and Ambush, skills that increase Lord Soul, your damage by a certain percentage, they're generally a much higher damage increase than really anything else you can do in the game, especially when you start stacking all these damages together. So this is exactly why Affinity and Crit Boost, pound for pound, is the utmost way to increase your damage in any build that actually does crit hit, of course. And this is why you see so many builds that look exactly like this or something like this. Weakness Exploit is going to be at maxed out, so you get your 30% affinity. Let's just show it. On weak spots, this is why as you are getting more comfortable with your weapon and your game, that's my German Shepherds, As you get more comfortable with the weapon and your games, you start to refine your gameplay. You start to constantly aim at the monster's head. This is why everybody's trying to damage the head. It's the most highest hit zone value that you can get as a weak point. You get huge damage when you do crit hits on it, and weakness exploit is the key to that. And then you're going to add your 30% maximum might, 30% for latent power when it kicks in, the 5% in your weapon. That's 95% affinity. That's 95 out of 100 hits. That gets 25% additional damage. Excuse me, 40% additional damage, because you always run your crit boost with 100% affinity if that's your aim in your build. There are some builds that don't go for 100% affinity, and then you might not run crit boost based on your build or your weapon type, but don't make this super common mistake. Anyway, so they'll have a build that we're just talking about, even with the gore pieces, to give the 25% additional affinity, the 30% from the weakness exploit, the maximum might, your temperament, whatever, agitator, you got 100% affinity, and then they deck out their weapon like this with attack boost 5, razor sharp handicraft, stuff like that. Whew. And it's like, okay, first let's start off with Master's Touch, because this is super important. It's another reason Affinity is such a powerful skill, is because there's other things like Crit Boost that merge so well with it, and also Master's Touch. What this means is every time you do a crit hit, there's an 80% chance 4 out of every 5 crit hits are not going to consume a lick of sharpness. Nothing. Not at all for 80% of your hits. So if you're practically doing 100% of your hits, that means your sharpness is now 5 times whatever your normal sharpness is. And for a perfectly rolled Artian, you have the 30 sharpness in your weapon, the 20 in your base, that's 50. So you multiply that by like 4. That's like 200 sharpness virtually, as long as your majority hitting uh, weak spots the head, or it doesn't have to be the head, but just something that's a weak spot, a tail usually, an appendage or something like that. So you just never lose sharpness. This is how you have those runs where when things go perfectly and you get the flash knockdown and the trap and the environmental hazard and the stun and the paralysis, and the monster's just flat on their face over and over again. If you are not running Master's Touch, you will drop out of that white sharpness and start losing damage significantly. Even if you have 2 levels of sharpness, or you're running razor sharp handicraft, because that's only a 50% reduction of overall sharpness. So it's nice, don't get me wrong, but it's never going to be as efficient as Master's Touch as long as you have near 100% affinity. And just to make a point on the attack boost, I can do this with some simple math right here, easy to understand. Here it is. Attack boost increases your attack by 4%, and then your bonus is plus 9 additional raw. Let's just say you have a weapon with 200 flat attack. 4% of that is 8 raw, and then you have plus 9, that's 217. Your effective raw is now 217, right? Now, if you have a 200 base raw weapon and you have near 100% affinity, let's just say before the crit boost, just 25% additional damage, that's an effective raw of 250. That 217 comes nowhere close. It is nowhere close. So don't make that common mistake. If you are not running a build that has so much affinity that's near 100%, or really after about 75, 80%, that's when you start running Master's Touch. Anything after that point, it's always crit boost over attack boost. You can make builds that have attack boost 5 and crit boost 3. I have a couple of rolled weapons like that. I just don't use it for the exact purpose that we're talking about. Overall, your attack is going to be higher, your raw is going to be higher, but you're going to lose sharpness. Even with that build, you're going to lose sharpness, because that effective raw is 80. 2 sharpness in your weapon, 20 base, and it's a fixed 80. It's never changing. Razor sharp handicraft, at the very best, even if you add that, then you're removing damage, so there's no point in it. But even if you add that, you turn that 80 into 160. Whereas you're turning 50 sharpness in your weapon into effectively 200 sharpness with Master's Touch. So because of these reasons of crit boost, affinity, and Master's Touch working so well together, it just creates such a huge explosion of damage. It's just not going to be touched by anything you can do to increase your raw and things like that. Enough yapping. Let's go in the training room and actually see these numbers. All right, now let's look at these glorious numbers. This set is just increasing my affinity, no crit boost, no raw increases, and we're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of about 12 to 20 increases in our damage ticks per tick, depending. It's very similar to the raw that we put so much raw in, but you would never be able to put that much raw in a build efficiently, anyways. So very comparable to that, but once we start crit hitting on wounds, it's about, I don't know, 25, 30 per tick higher than our base testing. And then once we start adding the crit boost, now we got the affinity and the crit boost, but no other raw skills, just those two. And it just gets absurdly high with just these numbers. Now we're looking at 30 to 35-ish increases in the damage ticks, depending on the type of hit that we're doing. And then when we do get to the wounds, 40, like 38 to 43, depending on the type of hit we're doing. Just ridiculous. And there's nothing else in conjuncture that will do this much damage. And there it is, the top 5 damage inducing things that you can do in this game as far as the tier list goes. And as we discussed before, for your ideal combination is going to require some tweaking and some balance of these top 5 aspects based on your playstyle and primarily your weapon. You have weapons like the gun lance or the hunting horn, where certain shellings or certain notes don't crit hit. So a lot of things we talked about affinity and crit boost are not going to be the most damaging, inducing, or increasing aspects of that weapon. So, some kind of balance, but that's why I'm going to start a series starting next week. We're going to start with the hunting horn, and I think I'm trying to get Techo and definitely going to get Pips to share some of their builds with me and explain to me exactly why they like the build and why they find it useful and helpful. Most of these builds are going to, predicate pretty high damage, but there's going to be some skills in these builds that you might not think to put in that makes them absolutely wonderful. For example, putting earplugs 2 into a gun lance build, because you can create that space, and with a gun lance you don't evade very much. You're going to either try to perfect guard and then you try to get your damage in. So having something like earplugs allows you to just to be in the fight and then constantly be inputting damage without ever having to back off. A couple of perfect guard attempts here and there, and then you're just right back in their face. No screams are going to stop your DPS, and during those windows you're able to accomplish so much in the fight and have such bullying fights because you're doing these things. So I want to go through every single weapon. I don't play every single weapon, but in our squad Zero Feints, we definitely have people that play every single weapon. I'm going to gather 2 of the very best in their craft. Like for Sword and Shield, we'll probably do Felix 1, 2, 3, and Kaito might actually do 3 for that one because I don't know how to decide which of the 2 to use because they're all 3 phenomenal. So we're going to go Big Iron for Hunting Horn. I want to get Pike involved for the Great Sword, and maybe we'll talk about that in the squad. People, please give me your best builds and explain to me why, because I want to show the rest of our audience like these are amazing builds and this is exactly why. And they're going to be damage centered, but they're also going to have other attributes that you're probably not thinking of to make them absolutely amazing. One of my next projects is a mounting video as well for Reginald. I haven't forgotten about you. I just haven't had time to get to it. But I want to make a video on every single mechanic about mounting, whether it's opening up 3 wounds, 2 wounds, 1 wounds, how to do the wall bangs from it, what everybody else can do during these moments. Other than that, a lot of good stuff coming. Please check out the link in our Discord for Zero Feints. Come join us. We're getting close to 450 global hunters. We're totally down with this franchise and other franchises, and we have an agreement not to be dicks while we're gaming. So it'll be an amazing place. I think that's all about it for now. Lots more to come. Thanks for joining me, and see ya.